So we're here to talk about a dirty little secret. Is that the side of the agenda? Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. I'm Jonathan Sills, Executive Resident at Battery Ventures. I know we have a few months to go until Thanksgiving, but I promise you we're going to talk some turkey today, give you some very specific insights that you can take away from these two gentlemen. The first one I'd like to introduce, of course, is Chris from Apartment List. A really interesting company. If you haven't checked out Apartment List, they're taking a very renter-centric approach to the rental marketplace. And Chris is responsible for product growth and the Renters Operations Center as COO over there. Prior to Apartment List, Chris spent 5 years with the Boston Consulting Group in Los Angeles and Chicago. Both of the guys on stage today have both a comp sci and a business background. Chris got his Bachelor's of Science in Computer Engineering from Northwestern and his MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business. And then, of course, Adam is the Chief Kahuna at Kahuna, the CEO. They are a leading mobile marketing automation company. You may know them for push notifications, but when I think about Kahuna, it's about a lot more than the technology. The world in which we operate today in 2014 and the ways that users engage with any sort of company has changed fundamentally. I think Kahuna gets that, and they're doing some really interesting things to help companies like Apartment List, as you'll hear today, be successful as it relates to engaging their users, now and into the future. So Adam's been a part of a number of Silicon Valley growth stories, just to name a few of them, both as an employee and as a VC. Oracle, Facebook, Menlo Ventures, Bain Capital Ventures have all benefited from Adam's combination of business and computer science experience. So with that, we'll kind of get right down to it and talk a little bit about this dirty secret of mobile. But first, I'm going to start it off with Chris. And Chris, maybe from the standpoint of Apartment List, you could tell us how you're approaching mobile growth and specifically how the app is contributing to your success, because it's not only an app, but it's available on multiple platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're 70% mobile today, mobile web native as well as desktop in there. The first step for us in approaching mobile was you have to commit to it as an organization. So we made the decision back in 2012 to be mobile first. And that means the way we think about the design, the way we solve technical challenges, and even the types of people you hire and the frameworks you use have to change so you can actually start down that path. And that was a bit of a hard transition for us because our desktop site, where we had the best engagement with users, was a map that takes up 80% of the screen and looks awesome on a 20-inch or 23-inch Retina display. Doesn't look great on a phone. So we actually had to fundamentally reinvent our business for mobile. And sort of, fast forward to today, we've grown our mobile 220% since last year. Large portion of that's mobile web, but native has been the biggest contributor to that growth, and especially on the engagement side of it. I want to share a slide to sort of show how important native is to us and how that's changed over the last year. So we're going to look at three metrics that we think of as really important to our business. The first is what's been the change in share of our unique renters on our native app. So the share has gone up 2x since the last year. So the way to think about that is if our share was 10% of our users were on native last year, it's 20% this year. So good growth on the unique side. Even better is our sessions have gone up 3x as a percent of our share. So, it's slightly outpacing the growth in unique, so we're getting better engagement from each unique who installs our app. And that's good, and that's good growth. But what's really important and what Adam and I will talk a lot about is it's not just audience, but it's engagement, right? And that's where we've actually had the most success. So our conversions as a share of total is up 7x. Since last year. And that's a large part of where we spend our time is how do you engage with that user? What's the life cycle different from web or mobile web? And actually, it's only 6.97, but we're still pretty happy with that. So, and then the third thing for us is you get the growth, you get the engagement on native, and then there's a bunch of things that you can do differently on native than you can do on mobile web even. And so actually how you think about solving the problems for your business can change as well. And we're starting to take advantage of a lot of that stuff in our native app because rentals is an online to offline industry, right? It's different than, people say, are you guys like Airbnb? Well, no, because people will do a short-term rental sight unseen. 95% of people who rent an apartment want to actually see it in person. So we have a much tougher challenge to solve, and native's helping us bridge that gap of online to offline.
Terrific. Well, I'll turn it over to Adam. The title of this session, we sort of teased that 90% of mobile user acquisition is generating $0 in revenue. What do you mean by that? And what does it mean for companies that are focused on mobile growth and people in the audience thinking about that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the soft underbelly of growth, where Kahuna is fortunate enough to have now hundreds of customers in a bunch of different verticals, 10 plus verticals, and a bunch of our mobile customers are growing really, really quickly. And they were seeing their install counts going through the roof. And they started reporting on how many installs. And they started talking to us like, hey, the number of engaged, valuable users, those who are converting, purchasing, it's lower than I thought. And we started doing some analysis. And the nice thing is we have a bunch of data scientists on the team. And we started uncovering that if you have 100 installs, on average, 90 are doing nothing of value. 8 or 9 are doing, a light value, and there's 1 or 2 VIPs. And so we saw that 90% drop off, and we knew that the best way to change that is through mobile messaging. And what we also saw is you gotta do the mobile messaging sooner rather than later. You can't wait for a month and a half, because by that time, they've already forgotten about you.
So whether it's early in the life cycle or at any other time, how have you guys managed this at Apartment List, Chris?
Yeah, so one of the things that took us a while to realize was that the way people are going to engage with us to the conversion event on native is different than how they were doing it on web and mobile web. And we launched our app and we looked for some data to come in, and the first time we were a bit disappointed, but what we did see was we have a feature called My List, which is a version of favorites on steroids. It was getting 5x the engagement on native that it was getting on mobile web or desktop. And that was sort of the trigger that led us to realize that people would open the app, they would browse, they would search, they would save a few things to favorites at a much higher rate, but then they wouldn't convert, right? So then it was how you actually bring folks back and engage with them, throughout that cycle. And that's where push comes in. That's where how you design the app. You can even tie it into some of your other remarketing strategies. But push is the biggest way to get that back. And we've worked with Adam a lot on that to do behavioral-based pushes to bring those folks back.
Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. You've got a customer flanking you here. So what were some of the things specifically?
Yeah, let's see if I can pop this guy up. We got my. All right, perfect. So, what we worked with Apartment List to do, and it was part of our kind of growth marketing background, is to understand an Apartment List person's onboarding journey. And it's boiled down to find, organize, contact, where a user is downloading Apartment List for a reason. So they start browsing apartments, then they save their favorite apartments to a list, the My List that Chris was talking about, and then they contact the Apartment List when they're ready to go find their apartment. And if they get stuck in any one of these, they're not getting to the value. They're not getting the value of Apartment List. Apartment List makes it so much easier to find an apartment, but if you're not doing these 3 things, you're missing out. And so we went and co-analyzed all this data, and that drove efficient onboarding. So we found a bunch of users who had searched apartments but not added to their favorites. And we have messaging that takes just those users and talks about saving to favorites and the benefit of that. And then we found a bunch more users that had saved to favorites but had never contacted a broker. And we found those people in that first 7-day window, and we inspired them to go contact a broker to see an apartment. And what was exciting is in this first window, we took a bunch of these installs at 90%, not for them, but in general, and we changed the curve. So for example, for organized, people who searched for apartments but didn't create their list, we increased favorites by 150%. And by doing that, you just change the onboarding curve. And you can fundamentally change how valuable your installs are.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about what's the LTV of their app, right? But that's an average over their entire installs, entire conversions. We think about our engaged users and our really engaged users, and our engaged users are 4 to 5 more valuable to us than what an average LTV would tell you. And our VIPs that are really engaged are 10 times more valuable. And so how do you use that type of messaging to shift more people into that first group and move that first group into that second one? And as Adam mentioned, 90% of folks have unengaged users. We're at a point now where greater than 50% of our folks are converting on a regular basis for us. And that's totally changed how we think about continuing to invest in native.
If you think about that trajectory of engagement, I didn't have a chance to look at any of my emails backstage, but I did receive a push notification because they're impossible to ignore. And it told me that you have a new product announcement to make today, Adam.
We do. Thank you, Jonathan. So what we've done is we've productized this onboarding journey. And they're called Kahuna Onboarding campaigns. And what it does is that for every install a company acquires, they start on a personalized journey to get onboarded. And what happens is in those first 7 days or 15 days, depending on the industry, that based on what they do or don't do, they get a relevant, timely message. And it's so important, these onboarding campaigns, that it required a specific product, because it's that first and second push message that a user is deciding whether to believe in your app or not.
Right.
And if you're sending a generic, hey, welcome, or we miss you, they're not going to turn off notifications, they're going to uninstall the app. And so what's exciting is we have great results with Apartment List. Another one of our customers, ThreadUp, they started running onboarding campaigns for new users who showed purchase intent but didn't make their first purchase. We increased conversions 900% for them. And then there is another large music streaming service that probably 70% of you have in your pocket right now. We launched onboarding campaigns with them, and we reduced churn 8% in a month. And if you think about an 8% monthly reduction in churn, when you compound that annually and add the viral coefficient, the growth implications are staggering. So we're really excited to roll out onboarding campaigns. It's now generally available, and we're here to dramatically change the install to value ratio for everyone out there.
And one of the really important things about the onboarding campaigns and how you engage with people, through push and on native, is you guys find specific events and find the right timing and the right amount of messaging to do. When we originally launched native, we made a mistake, and we said, hey, let's treat our push strategy very similar to how we've done email remarketing. And let's get the guy who's been awesome and crushed it on email remarketing to be in charge of designing the campaigns, the frequency, and the cadence for that. And we learned that is pretty much the exact opposite way of how you actually want to engage with someone on native, because what that leads to is that leads to a lot of uninstalls and not a ton of engagement, right? Someone who opens an email and is annoyed by it, not a huge cost, right? But someone who gets really pissed off at the second or third push message in 48 hours is just going to hold down their thumb and uninstall the app really quickly. And that's a huge loss.
And you made a great point. Like if someone in the first 2 days now with Kahuna and Apartment List combined organizes, and contacts, we make the decision not to send them a push. So a lot of the elegance is knowing when not to send a message and just let that VIP run, because they are actively looking at apartments and they don't need a push telling them to save items to their list.
What else do you have planned from an onboarding perspective? Anything, Chris, to share with the group?
We're going to be, we've got a new product that is allow you to schedule and book a tour online for an apartment, a specific unit, a specific date and time to go see that's rolling out right now. And so we're working on what is the messaging between when they book that and how we keep them engaged all the way through to that appointment. And then what are the things we can offer after that, because there's a lot of location-based features that the phone can tell us that web and mobile web haven't, that we really want to tie into the messaging, right? You think about the opportunity of, I know this person, is at this apartment right now, just completed a tour of it, and I can recommend a few other places nearby that have opening, and then send that to them in a push, right? And then especially take advantage of the new push types that Apple is rolling out in iOS 8. That's going to be a really great, interactive, well-timed experience that we're really excited to roll out there.
That's cool.
That's cool.
Yep.
So looking longer term, you mentioned there's that critical period. Maybe it's in the first 3 days or 7 days or 10 days. What about looking beyond? Is all of that really inherent in the product, or are there things that can be done from a user engagement perspective with the messaging?
Yeah, well, I'll kick it off. Well, that's the first thing we announced was the customer engagement engine, which is another thing that we talk about is the average lifespan of a native app user is 2 to 3 months. But with appropriate messaging, you can uncover when they're showing interest in their second apartment search and send messaging around that. So once they get onboarded, then you got to filter into a behavior-based life cycle so they never get annoyed with the messaging, but they remember at timely moments that Apartment List is on their app and Yahoo is on their app.
Yeah, I mean, the average renter searches for an apartment once every 2.5 years. And right now we think of our LTV and a customer as, hey, let's just get through these 6 to 8 weeks that they're looking for the apartment right now. But what we really want to get to is, hey, how can we be the only thing that they need or use through the 8 to 10 years that people are typically renters before they become homeowners? And how do we actually manage not just a month or 2 long cycle, but a year-long cycle with that engagement is what we're going to start thinking about next.
Any other native apps that you guys see that are doing a great job that folks in the audience could install and take a run at to maybe get inspiration?
So you got any to pop
So
up?
I think it's in the real estate category, but they do for sale real estate. I think Redfin actually does the best combination of how they engage with you across push, email, and then location-based. You create a list, you start saving stuff to favorites, and it is very seamless in that space. The only downside is you just get depressed when you see the prices here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So.
And I tip my cap to Bleacher Report, where they've actually, and I'll say they have like a 50-person custom team, and the cool thing is they're getting all this user-generated content, and they're using it for mobile messaging. So I think one of the things that a lot of mobile apps should look at is, do they have great content that their viewers should be seeing? And chances are they're not finding it on the 7th page of their mobile app.
Right.
You got to show it to them.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. I see that we're out of time. Hope you had a lot of value out of the conversation. And definitely check out Apartment List and the Kahuna for more information.
Awesome.